Hey, everybody, this is Eva, and I am taking over today's episode of the Career Lunch Break podcast. It's a solo episode, and I wanted to make a hopefully quick, but I'm a yapper episode to answer some of my most frequently asked questions in my LinkedIn messages. A lot of people reach out to me asking, how did you make the pivot from being in education to being in sales? Can you tell me about your journey? Can you give me some advice? And I can't really answer that in a LinkedIn message. And it would be insane to take calls for every time I get those messages because they happen so frequently on a weekly basis. So I figured, here I am, gonna tell my story real quick. And so this way, everybody can hear a little bit about what I went through, my journey, how I handled it. So always wanted to be a teacher, which I think is the case for a lot of people that are teachers. I think you always hear like, oh, well, I always wanted to be a teacher. And then I became a teacher. Without diving too far into my past and my history, I grappled with it a little bit. Then I decided this is what I'm doing. Went through college with a major in English, got my master's degree in education, and I started teaching at 22, 23 years old in the New York City Department of Education, which is now New York City Public Schools, but I know it as a New York City DOE, so we'll refer to it as that for the purposes of this episode. So I worked in the DOE for my entire teaching career, and I really, really liked it at first. I taught primarily high school, and I taught middle school a little bit later, but I'll get to that. I really liked it. I enjoyed my students, my colleagues, the work that went into it. I really did genuinely have a good time. A couple of years into my role as a ninth grade ELA teacher, I became an instructional coach and also the coordinator of student activities. Still had a full class load, which is 5 periods a day, 34 students in a class, because that's the max, or that was the max in the DOE at the time. And I enjoyed all aspects of that work, right? I was an instructional coach helping to hire and onboard new teachers and then observing them, coaching them, supporting them through lesson planning, lesson delivery, acclimating to the school culture. I was the coordinator of student activities as well. I was planning prom, I was planning graduation, homecoming, all student events. I oversaw all the clubs within the school as well, making sure that clubs were having events and that there was attendance and that everything was being done in the way that it needed to be done, right? Built out a lot of processes for that. And I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I started getting this like itch, right? That I don't know if I still want to do this. Do I even still want to be a teacher? Do I even want to still be in education? And I went back and forth with that a lot. And I decided, you know what? I've been just in this one building. Let me try a different building and see if that reinvigorates me. And if that doesn't do it, then it's really time to start thinking about what else I could do. So I went to a new building, and this building was a 6th through 12th grade building. So now I was having some new challenges. I was able to teach middle school, which is something I had never done before. I was still able to help support teachers, although I was the new teacher in this building. So that was not as prevalent as in my old building. And I did support coordinator of student activities. We had co-coordinators in this case. So I was still doing a lot of the similar work that I was doing in my previous building, just with some new people, new challenges, new materials. And it was a great building. It was a great school. I loved my students, my colleagues. I really had nothing to say that nothing crazy to say. And I think a lot of people expect this dramatic story of, this one thing happened and then I decided to leave. And that wasn't the case for me. It is valid when that happens. I know that that's true and that's real and it's awful. I didn't have that. Sure. I mean, one of my principals was involved in this like crazy scandal, but that's the DOE, right? There was a lot of typical stuff that you would find in a large school district like that in this country. So I still was feeling, I'm not sure what I want to do. I'm not feeling it. Like, I'm not really feeling this still. I was getting frustrated with my students, frustrated with my colleagues, frustrated with myself. I was bored. There was just this thing where I was like, I don't want to do this. I need more challenges. I need something new. I'm over it, right? Like, how many times am I going to read the Odyssey and teach you how to write an essay about it? I mean, great book, especially the graphic novel version. But, I was kind of over it. So the summer of 2020, after, we all had the crazy, I guess, winter, spring, right, of 2020, where everything went a little wild here in the US, I was really doing some reflection on life, where I was at, what I wanted to do. In July of 2020, I also was officially declared cancer-free after being diagnosed back in 2017. Thankfully, it was a relatively simple situation compared to others that struggle with similar things. So I was working, I was able to still work, do everything I needed to do while still going through all those doctor's appointments and all of that stuff. But being declared cancer-free finally in that summer, for some reason, like something clicked and I was like, okay, I've passed this hurdle that has been on my mind for the last 3 years. Now I can really start thinking about my life and time. We don't have as much time as we think we all have, right? We don't have as much time. We just don't have as much time as we think we all have. And we shouldn't be spending the time that we do have doing things that don't make us happy, or at least make us okay, right? The reality is you are not going to like your job every single second of every single day. You're going to have weeks where it might be really, really hard, but you're also going to have weeks that it's going to be amazing. And it's important that it balances out and that you feel good, right? That you feel good about what you are doing. So I started really thinking about that and I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And when I decide something, like it's done, that's it. We're moving forward. And, maybe it's a flaw, maybe it's a strength. My husband gets really annoyed at it. So anyway, but when I decide I want to do something, that's it. It's done. Don't talk to me about anything else until I get that done. So I decided I was going to officially start looking for roles outside of the classroom. And this was in September of 2020. I made that decision. Still was teaching virtually. We were still remote at that point. And I made the decision I was going to start pursuing a new role. What was I going to pursue? Anything outside of education, anything in corporate, right? Which is what a lot of people say. That's how a lot of people start their search. It makes sense. Teaching and education is its own little bubble where like you don't learn about all of these other roles that exist in the workforce. I'm an account manager right now. I did not know what that was. I thought it was like, I don't know, accounting. And people will reach out to me. They'll be like, oh, you moved into accounting? I'm like, no, it's just sales, but okay. But there's so many roles that we don't know about. And we owe it to ourselves to do that research and to really pinpoint what we want to target. I didn't do that at first. I was using my same old teacher resume that I used to get my teaching jobs and applying to anything that looked good, thinking to myself, well, I have all this experience and I'm great and I can do this and I can do that. Like I should not have a problem getting a job. That's true, but that piece of paper didn't show that. Like they were looking at that piece of paper before they ever talked to me. So I went a couple of months using that resume to apply to jobs and I was getting nothing, which now I look back at it and I'm like, yeah, duh. Like you're using a document that's meant to position you for what you're moving towards, but everything on that document just shows everything that you've done as if you're still staying in that role, still in that teacher speak, 504s, IEP plans, using all of that terminology and applying to roles in, I don't even know what I was applying to, like random roles. I got frustrated, was networking on LinkedIn with people and people said to me like, you should pick one thing. You should be specific. And I'm like, I don't know what to pick. Like I was leading with, I'm a teacher, an instructional coach, and coordinator student activities. And yeah, that's great if you're looking for something in that similar space, which I wasn't. Finally, I connected with a coach on LinkedIn who chatted with me, ended up working with them to redo my resume and figure out how to talk about myself in interviews. And when we were going through my resume, they were asking me, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know, anything outside teaching. Look, I can do all these things. And they were like, right, yeah, that's great. But what do you want to do? You need to pick something specific. And I give that advice to clients that I work with now, and I get a lot of pushback. And let me phrase it to you like this. If you are a teacher right now, right? Chances are you said, I want to be a high school ELA teacher, or I want to be a math teacher. Or if you're not a teacher, but you're in education, you say, I want to be a guidance counselor, right? Or I want to be a speech language pathologist, or I want to teach elementary school. You had a specific focus. You didn't just say, oh, I want to be in education. I want to work in a school. That doesn't tell people anything. That's the same thing. You can't just say, I want to work in corporate or I want to work in ed tech. That's great. Ed tech is a really is an industry, and it's a really small portion of everything that's available out there, right? You have all these types of industries available to you. So saying you want to be in ed tech, okay, cool. What do you want to do? That's like saying, I want to work in a school. Okay, what do you want to do? So it took me a while to understand that, but it makes total sense because you need to be focused and you need to be targeted in your search, because then people know how to envision you and people know how to help you. So that when you reach out to people and you say, hey, I am looking at account management roles. Tell me a little bit about your role at X, Y, and Z company. Then they know how to position their conversation and what to talk about and how to talk to you. You need to be specific. And that's what I always say. And that's what was told to me a little too late. But I learned, I figured it out. Figured it out late so you all could figure it out early. But I decided I wanted to go into account management, which is funny because when I first started talking about making this transition, my husband and I said, I'm not going to go into sales roles. And he was a teacher as well. And we both had this misconception about sales roles. We both thought you only live off of commission. It's pushy. It's cold calling. It's high pressure. It's all of these things, which could be true in some instances. However, if you are looking at account management roles, account executive roles, you will find that there are many companies in ed tech and not, right? Like all over in many, many industries, you will find that there are companies that have a really healthy base salary, a lot of times higher than your current teaching salary or very close to it. And then commission is just on top of that. So let's dispel that myth first, that sales roles are all commission based, because they're not. Are there some that are? Absolutely. When you see that OTE on sales roles, that means on target earnings. That includes the base and the commission. I always tell people, you want to know what your base is. You want to be able to live on your base. You don't want to make everything just about the commission or about base and commission, because guess what? Commission is not your rent money. It's not your mortgage money. It's not your grocery money. That's your extra gravy, right? The base salary is what you need to live off of. I didn't realize that because I didn't ask, because I immediately wrote off sales because I had this weird misconception about it. When I was working with this coach and I was not sure what to do, they said to me, have you thought about sales roles? And I was like, yeah, no, I have thought about them. And the answer is no. And they were like, well, why not? And I gave them all of my grievances and they said, cool. Before we even go through this resume, I want you to take the week to reach out to people on LinkedIn that are specifically in account management roles. And I want you to hear from them what their day-to-day is like. And I was like, why are you giving me homework? I'm paying you, but okay. So I did it. And I'm really glad that I did. I reached out to folks that were account managers I was focusing on ed tech companies because that's where I wanted to go. And I was hearing from them. And so many people on LinkedIn were so kind. But it's a numbers game, right? You're lucky if you get 50% of the people to answer you. People that did answer me were so kind. And if people don't answer you, don't take it personally, because a lot of people are not on LinkedIn very often, may not check their LinkedIn DMs, may be overwhelmed by them. They're real people with real lives. So real quick, make sure you remember that. Don't take it personal. People that I did talk to were so kind, friendly, helpful, wanted to help, and they knew how to help me because I told them. I said, I am considering account management roles. I'm new to this. Would love to hear from somebody who's been in it. The more that I talked to them and the more that I understood what this entailed, I realized, A, I could do this because it sounds really interesting and really important to me. And B, I kind of have been doing similar things to this. I was supporting teachers with implementing new processes or new technologies or new platforms. I was convincing ninth graders that the Iliad and the Odyssey were just as exciting as Keeping Up with the Kardashians, right? I was able to talk about the value of things and make people see the value of what I was presenting in front of them, whether that was ninth graders, whether that was veteran teachers or new teachers, right? So I went back to that coach and I said, wow, you're right. And I didn't like admitting that because who wants to be wrong? But in this case, I'm glad that I was wrong because it led me to where I am now. Once I realized I wanted to focus on account management roles and was able to revise my resume, that's when things started happening. My resume no longer said things like, as a coordinator of student activities, I planned and executed prom and homecoming and graduation. Now it was saying things like, I navigated conversations with multiple groups of people, multiple stakeholders to coordinate and execute events that led to X% of increase in engagement, oversaw budgeting, oversaw inventory lists, right? Thinking about all the things that you might not even think about. And I remember talking about a specific example of what I've done. And I was like, yeah, it's not a big deal. Like I restructured this curriculum for the ninth grade. And the coach I was working with was like, hold on a second. I need you to tell me more about this. And I was like, what do you mean? That's what I did. Like I was a ninth grade teacher for these years. Like, that's what I did. And they were like, yes, but you have to realize that to you, that's just what you did. And I'm saying that in quotes, right? But to people outside of education who think they know what teachers do, this is important and this differentiates you and this shows your impact. So we really dug into stories like that of the things that I've done. And I was reminded of that recently because there is a client that I'm working with who is looking to transition into the ed tech space in a sales adjacent role. And she's currently a principal, and she was telling me about a story about a platform that she implemented in her building through the entire building, 100% adoption. And I kept pulling it out of her, asking her more about that. And the other day she goes to me, I almost didn't even tell you that story because I didn't think that it mattered. But now I see what you're talking about because this is my anchor story. And this is what's getting me these second, third round interviews because I'm able to talk about that and I'm able to show my impact. And that's it, right? That's what you need to show. You can't just list everything that you've done and expect people to understand the impact that you had. You need to show exactly what you've done, how you've done it, and what it led to. Otherwise, how are they going to know? They're not going to know. So worked with this coach, and I was able to really refine my resume, refine my interview story, started getting more interviews. Had an interview with a recruiter at what was my dream company at the time. It was an ed tech platform that I used all the time with my students, was so excited about it. And he was very kind. And he said to me, your resume is positioned for account management roles. You've applied to 6 different roles across 6 different departments in this company. That makes you look unfocused, and that makes me hesitate, and it will make other recruiters hesitate. I was pissed. I remember taking that. It was a phone call. Thank God it was a phone call because he couldn't see my face. I remember taking that call and being really annoyed. Like, who do you think you are? You don't know me. How dare you say that? Meanwhile, I was just like, okay, thanks. Because what am I going to say, right? I was really upset. And I realized now, as I look back at it, I was really frustrated, mostly with myself, because that meant that I had more work to do. That meant that I needed to refine my search and I needed to remain focused. My resume was ready to go and was telling my story of me being an account manager. So then why was I applying to operations roles? Why was I applying to professional learning roles when I had already decided for account manager? That was a desperation seeking in. And it happens. It happens to everybody. And when that happens and you let it take hold of you, that's when you start to spiral. And that's when things become less productive. Being focused may seem counterintuitive because you're not casting as wide of a net, but you're not going fishing. You are trying to find your next move. You need to be strategic. You do not need to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks because that's not going to help you. And that's when you're going to get frustrated. And that's exactly what happened. I was still going through this process. Now, remember, I started this process in September. I did not start my new role until June of 2021. So it took me the entire school year. And by the way, that's a coincidence. I didn't plan it that way. I didn't say, I want to start at the end of the school year, which a lot of teachers say, and I get it, right? You want to finish out the school year. You may or may not have a contract. You don't want to leave your students, or if you're an administrator, you don't want to leave your staff. The reality of it is sometimes you need to. I have worked with teachers that have had to leave in February because that's when the job offer comes up. And if a job offer comes up in February and you say to them, hey, can you wait until June when I finish the school year? They're going to say, no, I have 35 other people that want this job that could take it tomorrow, so I'm going to go to them. You can't put yourself in that position. So when you're making the decision to look, you need to be okay with the fact that you don't own the timeline. You do not own that timeline, and it's quite unfortunate, but it is the reality, and I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. That timeline is owned by the company that is doing the hiring. Some of them are absolutely ridiculous, right? Some of them are going 8, 10 rounds over weeks and months. And that's true. That is ridiculous. Nothing we can do about that. You need to be ready. You need to be ready that if that role comes up and you really want it, you got to take it because it may not be available at another time. You also can't wait until April, May, June to start your job search because the reality of it is this takes a long time. This takes months. I have worked with people that it takes 3 months, it takes 6 months, it takes 9 months. It depends on a lot of different things. So I got fortunate that it just so happened, I started the interview process in May for this company. And by the time they offered me the job, the start date was literally the Monday that I finished school. Like my last day of school was a Friday. I started this new job on a Monday. And when I tell people that, they're like, oh, so they waited for you. I'm like, no, they didn't. That was a coincidence. That is not the norm. I started this role, but before I started this role, I should say, that process took a couple of weeks. It was, I believe, 4 rounds. And what really stood out in that role is that I wasn't speaking in theory anymore. A lot of times people will ask questions in interviews, tell me about a time when this happened, or how would you handle this situation? And people answer it in theory. Well, I would do this, or I could see myself behaving in this way and treating it like this. They don't want theory. They want a real concrete example. So you should say something like, oh, I had a similar situation when X, Y, and Z happened. Obviously, you leave out identifying details. You don't be giving anybody's government name, but you give details enough for them to actually envision your story so that they can picture you in this role solving those kinds of problems. You need to get specific and you need to get intentional in your storytelling and how you present yourself. Once I started doing that, I was getting lucky. I shouldn't say getting lucky, right? Because that implies I didn't work for it. But I was getting more traction once I started doing that and being specific. In this specific process, I was telling my story. When they would ask me for specific examples and how I would handle certain things, I would have it relate back to something that I've done. That's because I prepped. I didn't go into these interviews cold. I prepped for every possible question. Of course, we can't always predict every question, but when you know your core stories to tell, when you know the core contributions and the core impact that you've had, you can think about it on the spot when they ask you to answer specific questions. Going through that process, I was meeting with the director, the person who would be and who ended up becoming my manager. And she had asked me a specific question about Salesforce, which is it's a CRM, it's a customer relationship management platform that is used often in sales roles. I had never used it before. I knew what a CRM was and I knew what Salesforce was because I did my research, which we all need to be doing our research, right? Even though you've never been in a sales role, if you're targeting a sales role, you should know what a CRM is and what a KPI stands for and what a quota is and what an SQL stands for, right? You need to be familiar with this language, with these platforms. So she asked me about Salesforce and I said to her, I've never used Salesforce. However, in my research, this is what I've noticed about it. This is what excites me about learning how to use it. And I can't wait to dig in and really learn about how this can help me in this role and how I can become better as an account manager learning this program. She ended up hiring me and she told me later on, when I was on her team while I was working for her, she said to me, something that really stood out to me in your interview is that you owned that you didn't have that direct experience, but you were able to tell me how the experience you did have could help you in this role. And you told me how excited you were and you showed me how excited and ready you were to learn and to use these platforms and to grow and to challenge yourself. That role that I had, my first account manager role, there were 7 bullet points of requirements on the job listing. I met 3 of those. So that's another thing people always say. Well, I don't meet all of the requirements. Okay, neither do half the people that are applying. Is it at least somewhat connected? Do you meet some of them? It's a wish list. It's not a requirement unless it's something super technical and super specific, like a degree in software engineering. But if you're going for a sales role, that's not a requirement, so you're good. But when she told me that just reaffirmed, the way that I approach the conversation and the way that I coach people now to approach those types of things. And I think it's important to remember that it's okay to say that you don't know something. You don't have to pretend to know everything because that would be crazy. And nobody knows everything, especially when you're moving into a new role. They already know that you're moving into this new role. So you want to make sure that you're showing how excited you are. So finally landed that role and have been in account management ever since. And a lot of people ask me, how did you do it? This is how I did it. I fumbled a lot, which I don't want anyone else to do. So I'm going to tell you what I did a few months in that I should have done from the jump. Target your role. Think about what you want to look for. Be specific. Position yourself in the way that you need to position yourself for the role that you are looking for. Make sure your resume is positioned in that way. Make sure your LinkedIn profile is positioned in that way. Make sure that you are showing your impact and how you would support another company, how you would support this company in this role that you're targeting. Show how you can solve those challenges. Network with people that are in roles that you are interested in or roles that are adjacent to that. And don't ask vague questions like, hey, would love to know how you got here. No, ask them, what drew you to this company? What's your favorite part about this role? Make it a specific ask because that's how you're going to learn and that's more likely to get a response. So this is my story. This is the entire story that I can't type into a DM. And every educator that I've talked to since I made this jump has said the same thing to me. They say, it's helped me so much to hear this from somebody who was on my side and somebody who is now on the side that I'm trying to be on. And when I first started talking to people, when I first made this transition, a lot of them said to me, like, you should actually do this. Like, you should really be coaching people through this. This is something that you seem to be really good at. You have knowledge and you've lived through it. And it took me a while to get here, but here I am. This is what I do now. I do support people through this transition because I didn't have all of the support that I needed from the jump. And I want to provide people with that. I know it worked for me. I know it's worked for people that I've coached through it ever since I've done it. And I'm excited to do that. And I'm excited to do it in a way that's strategic and specific to you. A lot of times people will reach out to me and they'll say to me, hey, can you rewrite my resume? First of all, no, I'm not going to. I don't just rewrite resumes, right? And then send you back this document. A resume rewrite with me is a collaborative process that we do together. Because if I just do it for you and send it back to you, and then you get an interview and you have to talk about your experience, I'm not there. How are you going to talk about it? So everything that I do is strategic and specific to the person that I'm working with. More importantly, every conversation we have is one that is going to be honest and specific to you. I'm a cheerleader to an extent. I'm not going to make you be unrealistic. I'm not going to tell you, yeah, this definitely will work, even though I don't think it will. I'm not sugarcoating anything, and you don't deserve that. You don't deserve somebody who's going to just sugarcoat everything because it's not the reality. You need to be grounded in reality, and you need to know the real things before you move forward. So that's my story. If there's any further specific questions about this journey, how I made this jump, or even how I can support you making this jump, my DMs are open. I am a real girl who checks my DMs and answers them. So please feel free to reach out. And thanks for joining me today on this solo episode of Erin Lewber's Career Lunch Break podcast. Have a good one.